The late summer heat pressed down on the Virginia plantation like a heavy blanket, suffocating and inescapable. Isaiah limped across the dusty yard, his misshapen left foot dragging behind him with each labored step. At 23 years old, he had spent his entire life being passed from one owner to another, considered damaged goods from birth due to his clubfoot. The current plantation owner, Master Harrington, had acquired Isaiah as part of a debt settlement, clearly disappointed by the cripple included in his payment. "Boy, get over here faster!" Overseer Jenkins bellowed from the edge of the tobacco field. "You think that foot gives you permission to move like a dying turtle?" Isaiah quickened his pace as best he could, the uneven ground making his progress painfully awkward. Sweat beaded on his forehead, not just from the heat, but from the anxiety of what punishment might come if he didn't satisfy Jenkins' impatience. "Yes, sir," Isaiah mumbled, keeping his eyes downcast as he approached. Jenkins stood with his hands on his hips, whip coiled at his side. Unlike some overseers who wore their cruelty openly, Jenkins had a different approach. He was calculating, observant, and far more dangerous for it. His eyes missed nothing, especially weaknesses to exploit. "Master Harrington wants an inventory of the storage shed by sundown, everything catalogued." Jenkins thrust a piece of rough paper and a stubby pencil toward Isaiah. "Master says since you can't work the fields proper, your damaged body might as well be put to use with numbers." Isaiah accepted the paper, careful not to make direct eye contact. He knew how to read and write, skills he had acquired in secret from an elderly slave woman named Ruth, who had raised him on his first plantation. Ruth had smuggled torn pages from her mistress's discarded books and taught Isaiah his letters by tracing them in the dirt at night. It was dangerous knowledge, forbidden to slaves, but Ruth insisted it might save his life someday. "I'll do it proper, sir," Isaiah said quietly. Jenkins snorted. "See that you do. And remember, boy, you may think yourself clever with those numbers and letters some of you learn on the sly, but cleverness in a slave is just another form of disobedience." Isaiah felt a chill despite the oppressive heat. Jenkins knew. Of course he did. The overseer missed nothing. "I only want to serve Master Harrington well, sir," Isaiah replied, the practiced submission bitter on his tongue. "Then get to it." "And Isaiah—" Jenkins leaned closer, voice dropping. "Damaged goods have less value. Remember that when you think about causing trouble." The storage shed stood at the far end of the plantation grounds, a solidly built structure that housed tools, seed, and various supplies. It was also stifling hot inside, with only 2 small windows allowing minimal air circulation. Isaiah wiped his brow as he began the tedious task of counting, cataloging, and recording the inventory. Hours passed as he worked methodically, his handwriting precise despite the stifling conditions. His foot throbbed with pain, but he had long ago learned to compartmentalize physical discomfort. Survival depended on it. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows through the small windows, Isaiah heard footsteps approaching. He tensed, preparing himself for Jenkins' scrutiny. But instead, the imposing figure of Master Harrington himself filled the doorway. "Sir." Isaiah immediately lowered his gaze and shifted his weight to stand, despite the protest from his aching foot. "Stay seated," Harrington commanded, his voice cultured and controlled, betraying his northern education despite his southern plantation lifestyle. "Jenkins tells me you can read and write. Is this true?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Denial would be pointless. The evidence was literally in his hands. Truth could mean punishment. Isaiah chose the narrow path between. "I know my numbers, Master, for counting, and some letters to mark things," he replied cautiously. Harrington stepped closer, taking the inventory sheet from Isaiah's hands. His eyes scanned the neat rows of writing, the organized columns of figures. A raised eyebrow betrayed his surprise at the quality of the work. "This is more than some letters, boy. This is proper writing." Harrington's tone was unreadable. "Who taught you?" Isaiah's mind raced. Ruth had died years ago on another plantation. There was no danger to her now. "An old woman, sir, on Master Wilkins' plantation when I was a child." Harrington nodded slowly, still examining the paper. "And she taught you to keep ledgers as well? To do sums and track inventory?" "No, sir. I watched the clerk sometimes, when I was cleaning the offices at Master Peterson's, before he sold me to settle his debts." Isaiah kept his voice steady, factual, not proud, not ashamed, just stating what was. A long silence followed as Harrington continued to examine the inventory sheet. Finally, he folded it carefully and tucked it into his coat pocket. "Tomorrow, you will report to the main house. I have ledgers that need organizing." Harrington's gaze lingered on Isaiah's clubfoot. "Your condition makes you ill-suited for field work, but perhaps you have other uses." "Yes, master," Isaiah replied, his heart racing beneath his calm exterior. The main house, away from the fields, away from Jenkins. As Harrington turned to leave, he paused in the doorway. "One more thing, Isaiah. If you ever falsify a single figure in my books, I'll have you whipped until there's nothing left to heal. Understand?" "Yes, master, I understand perfectly." After Harrington departed, Isaiah remained seated in the dim shed, processing what had just occurred. A new position, new dangers, new possibilities. That night, in the cramped cabin he shared with 7 other enslaved men, Isaiah lay on his thin pallet, unable to sleep despite his exhaustion. Beside him, an older man named Moses shifted to face him. "Heard you're going to the big house tomorrow," Moses whispered, his voice barely audible over the chorus of breathing and occasional snores. "News travels fast," Isaiah replied softly. Moses had been on the Harrington plantation for over 20 years. His face was mapped with deep lines, his hands gnarled from decades in the tobacco fields. "Listen to me, boy. The house ain't the fields, but it's got its own kind of danger. Eyes always watching, ears always listening, and the mistress—" He paused, glancing around to ensure others were asleep. "She's got a temper worse than Jenkins when crossed." Isaiah nodded in the darkness. "I'll be careful." "Careful ain't enough. You need to be invisible. Do your work. Keep your eyes down. Forget anything you hear." Moses's voice dropped even lower. "And whatever you do, stay clear of the master's study when he has visitors. Those Richmond men bring trouble with them." "What kind of trouble?" Isaiah asked. Moses was silent for so long that Isaiah thought he might have fallen asleep. Finally, the older man spoke, his voice a ghost of a whisper. "The kind that disappears people, the kind that has secret books separate from the plantation ledgers." Before Isaiah could ask more, Moses turned away. "Sleep now. You'll need your wits about you tomorrow." But sleep wouldn't come. Isaiah stared into the darkness, his mind racing with possibilities. The main house meant better conditions, possibly better food, and less physical strain on his body. But Moses's warning echoed in his thoughts. Secret books. Disappearing people. As first light began to seep through the cracks in the cabin walls, Isaiah had come to a decision. This new position was an opportunity, not just for slightly improved conditions, but for information. Knowledge was power, even for a slave, especially for a slave. Ruth had taught him that along with his letters. He would be the perfect servant, diligent, deferential, invisible. And all the while, he would listen, observe, and remember. If there were indeed secrets in Master Harrington's study, in those separate books, perhaps they held something of value, something that might, someday, somehow, be leveraged for the one thing Isaiah had never dared to dream of openly: freedom. The word itself was dangerous even as a thought. Isaiah tucked it away deep inside himself as he rose to face the new day, his clubfoot dragging slightly as he moved to splash water on his face from the communal bucket. Whatever game Master Harrington was playing by bringing him into the house, Isaiah would play his own game too. He had survived this long by being underestimated. Perhaps being the lame slave no one wanted had finally brought him an advantage no one, not even Master Harrington, could foresee. The Harrington mansion stood as a monument to Southern prosperity, its white columns gleaming in the morning light. For Isaiah, approaching the main house felt like entering foreign territory. He had glimpsed it from afar during his brief time on the plantation, but now he climbed the servants' stairs at the rear, his clubfoot making each step a deliberate effort. The head house slave, a stern-faced woman named Esther, met him at the door with a critical gaze. "You're to work in the master's study," she said, looking him up and down with obvious disapproval. "But you can't go in there looking like you just rolled out of the fields." What followed was a humiliating process of transformation. Isaiah was scrubbed nearly raw, his calloused hands treated with lye soap that stung his cracked skin. His field clothes were replaced with a set of plain but clean house servant attire. Throughout the process, Esther maintained a running commentary on the proper behavior expected in the main house. "You speak only when spoken to. You keep your eyes down unless directly addressed. You hear nothing, you see nothing, you repeat nothing," she instructed, her voice low and urgent. "Master Harrington doesn't tolerate gossip or carelessness." Isaiah nodded, absorbing every word. "Yes, ma'am." Esther's expression softened marginally. "You have an advantage, being lame," she said, surprising him. "People tend to forget you're there. Use that. Be forgettable." By mid-morning, Isaiah found himself in Master Harrington's study, a wood-paneled room lined with leather-bound books and dominated by a massive mahogany desk. Harrington sat behind it, examining correspondence, while Isaiah stood quietly awaiting instructions. "These ledgers need to be organized by date, then reconciled," Harrington finally said, gesturing to a stack of books on a side table. "You'll work here when I'm present, and in the small office adjacent to the kitchen when I'm not." "Yes, master," Isaiah replied, approaching the table. Harrington watched him closely. "I assume you understand the unusual nature of your position here. Most planters wouldn't allow a slave to handle their accounts." "I'm grateful for the opportunity to serve, master," Isaiah answered carefully. A thin smile crossed Harrington's face. "Gratitude has nothing to do with it. Efficiency does. My last clerk was stealing from me. A slave has no such opportunity. Everything you have belongs to me already." The cold calculation in the statement was delivered so matter-of-factly that Isaiah almost admired its brutal honesty. Almost. "You may begin," Harrington said, turning his attention back to his correspondence. Isaiah spent the morning immersed in columns of figures that told the story of the plantation's operations, tobacco harvests, supply purchases, slave acquisitions and sales. The work itself was straightforward for someone with his hidden skills, but the content turned his stomach. Seeing human beings, people he knew, people he lived alongside, reduced to inventory entries with purchase prices and depreciation calculations, was a special kind of horror. Just before noon, voices in the hallway announced visitors. 3 well-dressed gentlemen entered, and Harrington rose to greet them warmly. Isaiah kept his head down, focusing on the ledgers while straining to hear the conversation. "Harrington, good to see you," the tallest visitor said. "We were beginning to wonder if you'd changed your mind about our arrangement." "Not at all, Carlton," Harrington replied smoothly. "Just ensuring the timing was optimal. Please, let's discuss this in the parlor. More comfortable there." As they prepared to leave, Harrington glanced at Isaiah. "Continue with the ledgers. I'll return shortly." The men departed, closing the study door behind them. Isaiah remained perfectly still for several moments, listening to their receding footsteps, Once certain they were gone, he rose quietly and moved to the window, which offered a partial view of the front parlour through a gap in the curtains. The men were seated now, drinks in hand, their manner relaxed, but their expressions serious. Isaiah couldn't hear their words, but their body language suggested business rather than social pleasantries. After a few minutes, Harrington opened a slim portfolio and passed papers to the others. A sudden noise behind him made Isaiah freeze. He turned slowly to find Mistress Harrington standing in the doorway, her cold eyes fixed on him. "What are you doing away from your work?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the quiet room. Isaiah lowered his gaze immediately. "Forgive me, mistress. My foot was paining me. I stood to stretch it momentarily." Her eyes narrowed in suspicion. "At the window." "The light is better there, mistress. For my eyes," he added, gesturing vaguely toward the ledgers. She studied him for a long moment before speaking again. "You're the new house servant my husband mentioned. The one with the clever hands and damaged foot." "Yes, mistress." She approached, her silk dress rustling with each step. Unlike her husband's calculated efficiency, Mistress Harrington radiated a nervous energy, her fingers constantly fidgeting with her jewelry or dress. "Let me make something perfectly clear," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper though they were alone. "My husband may have brought you into this house, but I run this household. One misstep—" She glanced pointedly at his clubfoot, a cruel smile playing at her lips. "Well, one more misstep, and you'll wish you'd never left the fields." "I understand, mistress," Isaiah replied, keeping his expression neutral despite the threat. "See that you do." She turned to leave, but paused at the door. "And Isaiah, I don't believe for one moment you were merely stretching your leg. Don't take me for a fool again." After she left, Isaiah returned to the desk, his heart hammering in his chest. He had underestimated the danger of his new position. Mistress Harrington would be watching him closely now. The remainder of the day passed without incident. When Master Harrington returned to the study, he seemed pleased with Isaiah's progress on the ledgers, even nodding his approval at the organizational system Isaiah had implemented. As evening approached, Harrington dismissed him to the slave quarters with instructions to return at first light. Isaiah's mind was full as he made his way back to the cabin, his foot aching from standing most of the day. Moses was waiting for him, eyebrows raised in silent question. "It was educational," Isaiah said quietly as they sat together outside the cabin, watching the sunset paint the sky in violent reds and oranges. "How so?" Moses asked. Isaiah hesitated. "The master had visitors, important men from Richmond, I think. There was something about an arrangement." Moses's weathered face remained expressionless, but his eyes sharpened. "Did you catch any names?" "One, Carlton." The older man nodded almost imperceptibly. "Richard Carlton, Old Virginia money, owns shipping interests in Norfolk." Isaiah looked at him in surprise. "How do you know these things?" A ghost of a smile crossed Moses's face. "Been here 20 years, boy. You think I don't listen when the masters talk? Information travels between plantations faster than you might think. The house servants talk to field hands. Field hands talk to each other when plantations meet at market days." He leaned closer. "Carlton and his friends visit every few months. Always the same pattern. They meet, they talk business, and within a week, slaves go missing." Isaiah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. Missing? Sold off? No papers, no auction, just gone in the night, always the strongest. Healthiest men. Moses's voice had dropped so low that Isaiah had to strain to hear him. "Last time it was Thomas and Jackson from the North Field. Month before that, it was 3 from the Wilcox plantation next county over." "Where do they go?" Isaiah asked. Moses shook his head. "No one knows for certain, but there are stories. Rumors of work camps further south, secret operations. Dangerous work that uses men up quick." Isaiah processed this information silently. The ledgers he'd examined showed no record of slaves being sold or transferred recently. If what Moses said was true, there must indeed be separate books, just as the older man had warned. "The mistress caught me looking out the window today," Isaiah admitted. "She suspects me already." Moses cursed under his breath. "You need to be more careful. That woman is dangerous when crossed. Her first lady's maid disappeared after breaking a porcelain figurine. The official story was she was sold to traders heading west, but no one ever saw papers for that sale either." They sat in silence as darkness fell completely, the chorus of cicadas rising around them. Finally, Moses spoke again. "You have access now. Access means opportunity, but also risk. Whatever you're thinking of doing, and I can see you're planning something in those eyes, remember that your actions affect all of us. If you're caught—" "I know," Isaiah said solemnly. "I'll be careful." As they prepared for sleep that night, Isaiah found a small bundle tucked into his bedding, a scrap of paper, a stub of pencil, and a small knife carefully wrapped in a piece of cloth. "Tools," Moses whispered as he passed by, "just in case opportunity knocks." The next morning, Isaiah returned to the main house with the makeshift tools hidden in his clothing. The risk of discovery was enormous, but so was the potential value of whatever information he might uncover in Harrington's study. For the next 3 days, Isaiah worked diligently on the ledgers, earning grudging approval from Master Harrington and maintaining a careful distance from the still suspicious mistress. He learned the rhythms of the household. When Harrington took his morning ride, when the mistress visited with neighboring plantation wives, when the house was most quiet. On the 4th day, opportunity arrived in the form of an unexpected visitor, a messenger delivering news that required Harrington's immediate attention at the far side of the plantation. The master departed hurriedly, instructing Isaiah to continue working until his return. Alone in the study, Isaiah moved quickly. He began systematically searching the desk drawers, then the cabinets, looking for any hidden compartments or secret ledgers. Nothing. The bookshelves yielded no results either. Time was running short. Isaiah's gaze fell on the large portrait of Harrington's father that dominated one wall. It seemed slightly askew. Heart racing, he limped to the painting and carefully examined its frame. A slight depression in one corner caught his attention. He pressed it and heard a soft click. The painting swung outward on concealed hinges, revealing a small wall safe. Isaiah's breath caught in his throat. The combination lock stared back at him, an insurmountable obstacle. Or perhaps not. Isaiah had watched Master Harrington closely these past days. Twice he had seen him open his pocket watch and glance at the inscription inside. A date, perhaps. A meaningful number. Isaiah tried the master's birth date. Nothing. His wedding anniversary. Nothing. Then, with trembling fingers, he tried the date inscribed on the cornerstone of the mansion, which Harrington had proudly pointed out to his visitors. 4/18-29. The lock turned. The safe door opened. Inside lay a slim black ledger, different from the plantation account books. With shaking hands, Isaiah removed it and quickly flipped through the pages. What he found made his blood run cold. Names, dozens of names, organized in groups of 3 to 5. Next to each name was a figure, a price far higher than any slave auction would command. Dates of shipment, destinations marked only with initials. And there, on the most recent page, Thomas and Jackson, the missing field hands Moses had mentioned. The sound of approaching footsteps sent panic coursing through Isaiah. He quickly memorized as many details as he could, then returned the ledger to the safe, closed the painting, and hurried back to his desk. The study door opened to reveal not Master Harrington, but Mistress Harrington, her sharp eyes immediately taking in Isaiah's flushed face. "You look unwell," she said. her tone suggesting she didn't care about his health, but rather his behavior. "What have you been doing?" "Just working on the ledgers, mistress," Isaiah replied, fighting to keep his voice steady. "The figures are challenging today." She approached his desk, examining the open ledger. "Indeed," she murmured, then looked directly at him. "My husband places great trust in your abilities, Isaiah. I find myself wondering if that trust is misplaced." The threat hung in the air between them. "I only wish to serve well, mistress," Isaiah said, lowering his eyes. "We shall see," she replied. "We shall certainly see." As she left, Isaiah released the breath he'd been holding. She suspected something. Perhaps not specifically what he had discovered, but she sensed his deception. He would need to be even more careful now. That evening, he shared what he had found with Moses, whispering the details in the darkness of their cabin after the others had fallen asleep. "Slave trading is nothing new," Moses said quietly. "This is different," Isaiah insisted. "These aren't normal sales. The prices are too high, the destinations unmarked except for initials. And why keep separate books? Why the secrecy?" Moses was silent for a long moment. "There are stories," he finally said, "of operations in the Deep South. Mining, dangerous construction, work so deadly that buying slaves outright for it wouldn't be profitable. So instead, they rent them. No records of ownership changing hands, no questions when they don't come back. And Carlton and his friends are the brokers," Isaiah concluded, "finding healthy slaves, arranging their transport, taking their cut." "If what you saw is what I think it is," Moses replied, "then Harrington is selling men's lives twice over, once as property and again as disposable tools." The full horror of the situation settled over them. Isaiah's discovery had confirmed their worst fears, but it also presented a terrible dilemma. Knowledge without power to act was just another form of torture. "What do we do with this information?" Isaiah asked. Moses' reply was grim. "For now, nothing. We wait, we watch, and we pray that opportunity presents itself." But as Isaiah lay awake that night, another thought formed, a dangerous, possibly suicidal thought. The ledger contained not just past transactions, but planned ones, names of men still on the plantation who were slated for shipment in the coming weeks. If those men were warned, if they knew what awaited them. Isaiah closed his eyes, the weight of his knowledge pressing down on him like a physical presence. Tomorrow he would return to the main house, to the ledgers, to the pretense of being the dutiful servant. But now he carried with him something new, not just the burden of knowledge, but the first fragile seed of a plan. The following week unfolded in a delicate dance of deception. Isaiah maintained his diligent work on the plantation ledgers, earning continued approval from Master Harrington while enduring the constant suspicious scrutiny of the mistress. Each day, he absorbed more details about the household routines, the comings and goings of visitors, the patterns that might eventually offer an opportunity. During his brief evening hours in the slave quarters, Isaiah carefully shared selected information with Moses, who in turn began quietly identifying the men mentioned in the secret ledger, the next group scheduled for shipment to Carlton's mysterious operation. Samuel, Ezekiel, and David from the North Field, Moses confirmed in a whisper as they sat outside the cabin one evening. All strong men, all under 30, exactly the type they always take. "When?" Isaiah asked. "Based on the pattern of the previous shipments, I'd say within the next 2 weeks. Carlton's last visit was likely to finalize arrangements." Isaiah nodded, his mind racing. "We need to warn them." Moses' expression grew grave. "And then what? They can't run. Where would they go? Patrols would hunt them down within days. And if they resist when the time comes?" The unspoken consequence hung in the air between them. Resistance meant certain death, often in ways designed to serve as examples to others. There must be something we can do, Isaiah insisted. Moses sighed heavily. Perhaps, but not without tremendous risk. He leaned closer, his voice dropping even lower. There are people, white people who sometimes help, people with moral objections to slavery. Abolitionists, Isaiah said, the dangerous word barely audible. Moses nodded. There are networks, routes north. It's not just stories. Some do make it to freedom. He paused, studying Isaiah's face. But the cost of failure is higher than you can imagine, boy. Not just for those who try to escape, but for everyone left behind. Isaiah absorbed this sobering reality. Any action they took would endanger not just themselves, but potentially everyone on the plantation. Yet doing nothing meant condemning Samuel, Ezekiel, and David to a fate that might be worse than death. How would we even contact these people? Isaiah asked finally. Through intermediaries. There's a free black man who sells vegetables at the Sunday market. Jeremiah, he has connections. Moses hesitated. But first, we need more information. Dates, routes, names. Without specifics, there's nothing anyone can do. Isaiah knew what this meant. He would need to access the secret ledger again, and this time he would need to copy information, not just memorize it. The risk was enormous. I'll find a way, he promised. The opportunity came sooner than expected. 2 days later, Master Harrington announced at breakfast that he and the mistress would be attending a wedding at a neighboring plantation. Returning late the following day, the household staff would be reduced, with most house slaves accompanying them to serve at the event. You will remain here, Harrington told Isaiah. Complete the quarterly summary I requested. I expect it to be ready upon my return. Yes, Master, Isaiah replied, careful to keep his expression neutral despite the surge of anticipation that coursed through him. That night, he barely slept, mentally rehearsing each step of his plan. By morning, as the Harrington carriage departed with an entourage of servants, Isaiah felt a strange calm settle over him. The decision was made. There was no turning back now. With only a skeleton staff remaining at the main house, Isaiah had relative freedom to move between the study and the small office near the kitchen where he sometimes worked. He began the day legitimately working on the quarterly summary, establishing his presence and work ethic for the few servants who remained. Mid-morning, he made his move. With the housekeeper occupied in the laundry room and the remaining house servant busy polishing silver in the dining room, Isaiah slipped into Harrington's study and closed the door quietly behind him. His hands were steady as he approached the portrait, found the hidden catch, and opened the concealed safe using the same combination as before. The black ledger was there, exactly as he had left it. This time, Isaiah removed it completely from the safe and brought it to the desk. Working quickly, he used the paper and pencil Moses had provided to copy the most critical information: names, dates, destinations, contacts. The initials that had puzzled him before, DL, no, CH, he now recognized as likely locations: Dalton, New Orleans, Charleston. Most importantly, he found the next planned shipment. Samuel, Ezekiel, and David were indeed scheduled to be transported in 10 days' time, under cover of darkness, to meet a riverboat captain named Wells at the eastern property line. Isaiah was so absorbed in his copying that he almost missed the sound of the study door opening. Almost. He looked up to find James, Master Harrington's personal servant, who had supposedly accompanied the family to the wedding, standing in the doorway, his expression shifting from surprise to understanding as he took in the scene. Isaiah at the master's desk, the secret ledger open, the copied notes beside it. For a moment, neither man moved or spoke. Then James quietly closed the door behind him and approached the desk. "What are you doing, Isaiah?" he asked, his voice carefully controlled. Isaiah's mind raced through possibilities. Denial was pointless. The evidence was literally open before him. Fighting or fleeing would only compound his crime. Truth was his only option, partial truth at least. "Trying to save lives," he answered simply. James's eyes flicked to the ledger, recognition dawning on his face. "The special shipments." Isaiah nodded slowly. "You know about them." "I attend the Master everywhere. I hear things, see things." James's expression remained unreadable. "Things I pretend not to understand." Isaiah watched him carefully, trying to gauge whether this man was an unexpected ally or the witness who would send him to the whipping post. Or worse. "Samuel, Ezekiel, and David," Isaiah said quietly. "Do you know what happens to men like them when they're shipped south for these special arrangements?" James looked away, a flash of something, guilt, fear, crossing his face. "Stories. Rumors. Nothing certain. Men don't come back," Isaiah pressed. "Not ever. No records of sale. Just gone." "And what do you think you can do about it?" James asked, meeting his gaze again. "You're copying information. For what purpose?" The moment stretched between them, a precipice of trust that could lead to salvation or destruction. Isaiah made his choice. "There are people who might help them escape, but they need information. When, where, how the transfer will happen." James closed his eyes briefly, as if in pain. When he opened them, his decision was clear. "You need to put that ledger back. Now. The Master sent me back to retrieve documents he forgot. I'm supposed to be gone less than an hour." Isaiah felt hope drain away. James was choosing self-preservation. He couldn't blame him, but "I'll help you," James continued, his voice barely audible. "Not because I believe these men can be saved, but because I've watched too many disappear already." Relief and suspicion warred within Isaiah. "Why would you risk yourself?" James's expression hardened. "My brother was one of them. Last year, shipped to New Orleans. According to what I overheard. Never heard from again." Understanding passed between them. James moved to the door, checking the hallway. "Finish your copying. You have 5 minutes. I'll keep watch." Isaiah worked feverishly, transcribing the final details before carefully returning the ledger to the safe and closing the hidden compartment. James re-entered just as he finished. "The housekeeper is heading this way," he warned. "We need a reason for both of us to be here." Thinking quickly, Isaiah gathered the legitimate ledgers he'd been working with earlier. "You came to help me carry these to the small office. The Master wants the quarterly summary completed, and you're assisting since everyone else is gone." James nodded his approval of the story as footsteps approached in the hallway. When the housekeeper appeared in the doorway, they were innocently gathering account books, their manner relaxed and purposeful. "James, I thought you went with the Master," she said, surprise evident in her voice. "Sent back for some papers," James replied easily. "Found Isaiah struggling with these heavy ledgers. Thought I'd lend a hand before heading back." The housekeeper nodded, seemingly satisfied, and continued on her way. Once she was gone, both men exhaled in relief. "That was close," Isaiah murmured. "Too close," James agreed. "Whatever you're planning, be careful. The mistress suspects you already." "How do you know that?" "She instructed me to watch you closely when the Master isn't present. She thinks you're stealing or snooping." James's expression was grim. "She doesn't know exactly what, but her instincts are sharp." This was troubling news. Isaiah had underestimated how closely he was being observed. "Thank you for the warning." James helped him carry the legitimate ledgers to the small office, maintaining their cover story. Before leaving, he paused. "I can pass information if needed. I go to town regularly on errands." Isaiah nodded gratefully. "I may need that." "Thank you, James." "Don't thank me yet," the man replied soberly. What we're doing could get us all killed." After James departed, Isaiah carefully hid his copied notes inside his shirt. The information was now secured, but the danger had only just begun. He would need to get the details to Moses, who would somehow need to connect with Jeremiah at the Sunday market, who might be able to reach the mysterious network of abolitionists who might be able to help. So many fragile links in a chain that could break at any point. The remainder of the day passed in tense productivity. Isaiah focused on completing the quarterly summary as assigned, partly to maintain his cover, but also because failure to produce the expected work would immediately raise suspicions. That evening, when he returned to the slave quarters, Isaiah found Moses waiting anxiously. "Did you get it?" the older man asked, as soon as they had a moment of privacy. Isaiah nodded slightly, patting his chest where the papers remained hidden. "Everything. Names, dates, the location of the transfer, Eastern Property Line, 10 days from now, a riverboat captain named Wells." Moses exhaled slowly. "That's more than I hoped for. Now we need to get word to Jeremiah. Sunday market is 2 days away." "James knows," Isaiah admitted, explaining the unexpected encounter and its outcome. Moses's expression grew concerned. "Can he be trusted?" "I believe so. He had every opportunity to expose me and didn't. His brother was taken in a previous shipment." Moses nodded thoughtfully. "Having someone in the main house who's sympathetic could be valuable, or dangerous. Time will tell." He paused. "Now, let me see what you found." Under cover of darkness, Isaiah shared the copied information. Moses studied it carefully, his weathered fingers tracing the routes and dates Isaiah had transcribed. "Carlton has built quite an operation," he muttered. "Multiple destinations, multiple buyers. This isn't just a side business, it's an entire enterprise built on disappearing men." "Can Jeremiah's contacts help?" Isaiah asked. Moses carefully refolded the papers. "I don't know. This is bigger than helping 1 or 2 runaways. This is organized, with powerful men involved." He sighed heavily. "But we have to try. Sunday, I'll find a way to speak with Jeremiah." The next 2 days passed with excruciating slowness. Master and Mistress Harrington returned from the wedding, and Isaiah presented the completed quarterly summary, earning a grunt of approval from Harrington and a narrow-eyed stare from his wife. James gave no indication of their shared secret, maintaining perfect professionalism in his duties. Occasionally, when their paths crossed without others present, a nearly imperceptible nod would pass between them, acknowledgement of their dangerous alliance. Sunday finally arrived. The weekly market was one of the few occasions when slaves from different plantations could interact somewhat freely as they accompanied their masters or mistresses to carry purchases. Moses, given his age and trusted position, was often sent to help the cook select fresh vegetables. Isaiah, however, was not typically among those chosen to attend the market. His clubfoot made carrying heavy purchases difficult, and Harrington preferred to keep his new clerk close to the ledgers. "I need to be there," Isaiah insisted to Moses the night before. "I need to meet Jeremiah myself, explain what we've found." "Too risky," Moses countered. "Your absence would be noticed immediately, and if you're seen speaking with Jeremiah, then find a way to bring him here," Isaiah pressed. "Tonight, after market. The information is time-sensitive." Moses considered this. "Perhaps. There's a prayer meeting in the woods behind the north field. Harrington allows it, thinks it keeps us docile. If Jeremiah could join." "Tell him," Isaiah urged, "whatever the risk." As Sunday dawned, Isaiah found himself called unexpectedly to the main house. Harrington was in his study, reviewing correspondence. "Isaiah," he said without looking up, "I have business associates arriving tomorrow. Prepare the guest ledgers for review." Isaiah's heart skipped. Carlton and his men were coming earlier than expected. possibly to finalize details for the shipment that was now just over a week away. "Yes, master," he replied, careful to keep his voice steady. "Will Mr. Carlton be among them?" Harrington glanced up sharply. "You remember names well." Isaiah lowered his gaze. "Only trying to anticipate your needs, master. Mr. Carlton seemed particular about how his figures were presented last time." The explanation appeared to satisfy Harrington. "Yes, Carlton and 2 others. They'll be staying overnight. See that the special ledgers are organized as well." Special ledgers. The secret records of human trafficking. Isaiah nodded obediently, his mind racing with implications. This visit might be their only chance to gather additional information, or it might be the moment when their fragile plan was discovered. Throughout the day, Isaiah worked methodically, all while watching the clock. Moses would be at the market now, hopefully making contact with Jeremiah. The prayer meeting would begin after sundown. Everything depended on a sequence of events beyond his control. Evening arrived and Isaiah was finally dismissed to return to the slave quarters. He found Moses sitting outside their cabin, his expression unreadable in the fading light. "Well?" Isaiah asked quietly as he sat beside the older man. "Jeremiah will come," Moses replied, his voice barely audible. "After dark. But Isaiah—" He turned to face him directly. "He says what we're asking is nearly impossible, to rescue 3 men under guard with such little notice." Isaiah had expected this. "Did you tell him what's at stake? What happens to these men if they're taken?" "I told him everything. He'll listen to you tonight, but he made no promises." The waiting was unbearable. Isaiah paced their small cabin, his clubfoot dragging more pronouncedly due to his agitation. The other men watched him curiously, but asked no questions. They had grown accustomed to hushed conversations between Isaiah and Moses, sensing something significant, but knowing better than to inquire. Finally, well after darkness had fallen, Moses signaled it was time. They slipped away toward the north field, joining other slaves heading to the prayer meeting. The gathering took place in a small clearing in the woods, far enough from the main house to allow some privacy, but not so distant as to arouse suspicion. Several dozen slaves had assembled, some from the Harrington plantation, others from neighboring properties. The overseer, Jenkins, watched from a distance, bored but vigilant. Moses guided Isaiah toward the edge of the gathering, where a tall, lean man stood slightly apart from the others. His clothing, though simple, was of better quality than what slaves wore. This, Isaiah realized, must be Jeremiah. As hymns began to fill the air, providing cover for conversation, Moses made brief introductions. Jeremiah's intense gaze assessed Isaiah quickly. "You're taking an enormous risk," the free man said without preamble. "We all are," Isaiah acknowledged, "but the alternative is condemning these men to something worse than death. Tell me what you know." "Everything." Isaiah recounted the details he had discovered: the secret ledger, the patterns of disappearance, the scheduled shipment of Samuel, Ezekiel, and David, now just 8 days away. He explained the riverboat rendezvous, the captain named Wells, the destinations marked by initials. Jeremiah listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each revelation. "This is organized trafficking," he finally said. "I've heard rumors of these operations. Men sent to mines or construction projects so dangerous that normal slave labor would be too costly in terms of lost property. Instead, they rent men for exorbitant fees, work them until they're used up, then dispose of the evidence." His blunt assessment confirmed their worst fears. "Can your contacts help?" Isaiah pressed. Jeremiah was silent for a long moment, the hymns swelling around them. "Perhaps, not in the way you might hope, but perhaps." "What does that mean?" Moses asked. "It means we can't simply spirit 3 men away in the night. The Underground Railroad works one or two at a time, with careful planning, established routes. Jeremiah's voice was low but intense. What you're describing requires a different approach entirely. Then what? Isaiah demanded, frustration edging into his voice. Information, Jeremiah replied. The names you've provided, Carlton, Wells, the destinations, the patterns. This is valuable to certain people. People who might be able to disrupt the entire operation, not just save 3 men. Abolitionists with influence, Moses murmured. Jeremiah nodded slightly. And others. There are newspaper editors willing to expose such activities, lawmakers in northern states looking for evidence of illegal slave trading. Hope and disappointment warred within Isaiah. But Samuel, Ezekiel, and David, I can't promise their safety, Jeremiah admitted, but I can promise that your information will reach those who can use it most effectively. It wasn't the answer Isaiah had wanted, but it was honest. When will we know? He asked. You won't, necessarily, Jeremiah replied. Not right away. This kind of work happens in shadows, just like the operations you've uncovered. The hymns began to fade as the prayer meeting wound down. Their time was nearly up. What do you need from us now? Moses asked. Continue gathering information. Dates, names, contacts, especially any paperwork you can copy. Jeremiah's gaze locked with Isaiah's. And be prepared. If an opportunity arises to directly help Samuel and the others, we'll need to move quickly. With that, he melted back into the dispersing crowd, leaving Isaiah and Moses with the uncomfortable weight of partial hope. They had set something in motion, but its outcome remained frustratingly uncertain. As they walked back to their cabin, Moses sensed Isaiah's frustration. It's more than we had yesterday, he offered quietly. But is it enough? Isaiah replied. Carlton arrives tomorrow. The shipment is just over a week away, and all we've done is pass information to a man who made no promises. Moses stopped, placing a weathered hand on Isaiah's shoulder. Sometimes, boy, faith is all we have. Faith and patience. Faith and patience, Isaiah thought bitterly, the constant refuge of those without power. Yet as they reached their cabin, a strange calm settled over him. They had taken action, perhaps insufficient, perhaps futile, but action nonetheless. For men in their position, that itself was a kind of victory. Tomorrow, Carlton would arrive, and Isaiah would be watching, listening, gathering more information. The game wasn't over yet. As he lay on his pallet that night, staring into the darkness, Isaiah made a silent promise to Samuel, Ezekiel, and David, men he knew by sight but had rarely spoken with. Whatever happened, they would not disappear without trace, without witness. Their fate would be known, recorded, remembered. Even if he couldn't save them, he could ensure they weren't forgotten, that their stories would someday be told, that the men who trafficked in their lives would eventually face judgment, if not in this world, then in whatever lay beyond. It wasn't enough, but it was something, and for now it would have to do. The arrival of Richard Carlton and his associates the following day brought a flurry of activity to the Harrington plantation. Isaiah observed the visitors from his position in the study, where he had been arranging ledgers since dawn. Carlton was exactly as Moses had described him, tall, imposing, with the confident bearing of old money and unquestioned privilege. His companions were a contrast. One, a sharp-featured man with calculating eyes, introduced as Mr. Phillips. The other, a ruddy-faced, heavy-set individual named Watkins. "The ledgers are prepared as you requested," Harrington told them after pleasantries had been exchanged. "Isaiah, bring the special accounts to my private study." Isaiah gathered the black ledger from the safe, careful to keep his expression neutral despite the significance of the moment. He followed the men to a smaller, more secluded room at the rear of the house, where Harrington dismissed the house servant who had brought refreshments. "Leave us," he commanded, then turned to Isaiah. "You may stay. Take notes on the figures we discuss." This unexpected opportunity sent a surge of both fear and anticipation through Isaiah. He was being allowed to witness the very transaction he had been working to expose. He positioned himself in the corner, paper and pencil ready, his clubfoot tucked carefully beneath his chair to avoid drawing attention to his disability. The arrangements for next week are finalized. Carlton began without preamble, accepting a glass of brandy from Harrington. Wells will be at the Eastern Landing as planned. 3 subjects, yes? Samuel, Ezekiel, and David, Harrington confirmed, all excellent specimens as requested. Phillips opened a leather portfolio. The compensation structure remains as previously discussed. Half upon delivery, half upon confirmation of arrival at the destination. "Which is?" Harrington inquired. "Better you don't know the specifics," Carlton replied smoothly, "but I can tell you the demand for strong backs has increased with the new canal project. Very consuming work." A knowing chuckle passed between the men, making Isaiah's stomach turn. They spoke of human beings as if discussing livestock. "There is one additional matter," Carlton continued. "The success of our previous arrangements has attracted attention from associates further west. They have similar labor requirements and are willing to pay premium rates for appropriate workers." "Expansion possibilities," Harrington mused, clearly intrigued. "How many would they require?" "Initially, perhaps 5 to 7 per month. Quality is essential. They can't afford wastage." Wastage, the casual term for men worked to death, sent a chill through Isaiah's spine. Phillips consulted his notes. "We would need to establish a new transit route. The Mississippi route is becoming noticed." "Complaints from legitimate traders?" Harrington asked. "Questions from certain officials?" Watkins interjected, speaking for the first time. "Nothing substantial, but caution is warranted." The meeting continued for nearly an hour, with Isaiah dutifully recording figures, dates, and locations. His mind worked feverishly to memorize every detail that might prove useful. The men spoke openly in his presence, confident that a slave posed no threat to their operations, a slave whose literacy they knew about, but whose comprehension and intelligence they clearly underestimated. When the meeting concluded, Harrington dismissed Isaiah with instructions to prepare guest rooms for the visitors. As he left, Isaiah caught a final exchange. "That slave, unusual to have him present for such discussions," Carlton remarked. "Isaiah, damaged goods," Harrington replied dismissively. "Clever with figures but simple otherwise. And as you know, slaves are property. They have no standing to testify, no credibility beyond their master's word. Perfect confidentiality." Isaiah limped away, the bitter irony of Harrington's words burning in his chest. His supposed inferiority, both physical and intellectual, had become his greatest advantage. They saw only his clubfoot, only his servitude. They did not see the mind that was now filled with damning evidence of their crimes. That evening, Isaiah shared everything he had learned with Moses. The older man listened gravely, occasionally asking questions to clarify details. "This is larger than we thought," Moses finally said. "Not just isolated shipments, but an entire network. And now they plan to expand." "We need to get this information to Jeremiah immediately," Isaiah insisted. "Not just for Samuel, Ezekiel, and David, but for all those who would follow." Moses nodded slowly. "There's a delivery to town tomorrow. James is going. If he's truly with us, he might be able to pass a message." "Find out," Isaiah urged. "We have only 7 days now." The next morning, Isaiah managed a brief private exchange with James while delivering updated ledgers to Master Harrington's study. "I need your help," Isaiah murmured, their backs to the door as they arranged books on the shelf. "More danger?" James replied, barely moving his lips. "A message to town today." James gave an almost imperceptible nod. "To whom?" "A free man named Jeremiah. He sells vegetables at the market." "I know him. What's the message?" Isaiah hesitated, aware that each word spoken increased their risk. "Tell him the shipment is confirmed for next Tuesday night, Eastern Landing, Captain Wells. Also—" He paused, ensuring no one was approaching. "Tell him they're expanding operations westward, new routes being established, 5 to 7 men per month." James absorbed this silently, his face betraying nothing. "I'll find him," he promised. "But Isaiah, be careful today. The mistress has been asking questions about you." This was concerning news. "What kind of questions?" "About your past, your time with previous masters. Whether you've always been—" James hesitated, searching for the right word. "Observant." The warning was clear. Mistress Harrington's suspicions were growing. Isaiah would need to be extraordinarily careful. Throughout the day, Isaiah maintained a perfect facade of subservience and diligence, completing his assigned tasks with meticulous attention, while appearing utterly uninterested in the conversations happening around him. Carlton and his associates spent the day touring the plantation with Harrington, assessing operations and, Isaiah suspected, identifying potential candidates for future shipments. By evening, James had returned from town. The opportunity to speak privately didn't come until after nightfall, when most of the household had retired. "I found Jeremiah," James whispered, having managed to visit the slave quarters on the pretext of delivering a message from the master. "He said the information confirms what they suspected. Plans are being made, but he wouldn't share details." "That's all?" Isaiah asked, disappointment evident in his voice. "He said to tell you that sometimes the best way to fight darkness is with light," James added, "whatever that means." Moses, who had been listening silently, nodded slowly. "Exposure. They're planning to expose the operation rather than just rescue individuals. But that could take time," Isaiah protested. "Time Samuel, Ezekiel, and David don't have." "Perhaps," Moses conceded, "or perhaps not. We've done what we can for now. The rest is in others' hands." The following days passed in tense anticipation. Carlton and his associates departed, leaving behind an atmosphere of foreboding. Isaiah continued his work in the study, gathering what additional information he could, while maintaining his cover as the simple, dutiful slave. James provided occasional updates, movements of overseers, conversations overheard, preparations being made for the upcoming shipment. 5 days before the scheduled transfer, Mistress Harrington summoned Isaiah to her sitting room, an unusual and alarming development. "Isaiah," she began, her voice deceptively pleasant as she arranged flowers in a vase. "You've proven quite valuable to my husband. Your work with the ledgers has been impressive." "Thank you, mistress," Isaiah replied cautiously, keeping his eyes lowered. "I find myself curious about your background, your previous masters. They allowed you to develop these unusual skills." The question was a trap, carefully laid. Isaiah chose his words with extreme care. "I learned counting for inventory, mistress. Master Harrington has been kind enough to make use of what little ability I have." "Indeed." She moved closer, studying his face. "And yet, I've observed you. There's something watchful about you, something that doesn't quite fit the role you play." Isaiah's heart hammered in his chest, but he kept his expression neutral. "I only wish to serve well, mistress." "I'm sure." Her smile never reached her eyes. "You may go. For now." The encounter left Isaiah deeply unsettled. Mistress Harrington was not merely suspicious, she was actively investigating him, perhaps building a case to present to her husband. Time was running short, not just for the 3 men scheduled for shipment, but potentially for Isaiah himself. That night, unexpected news arrived via Moses. "There's word spreading among the house servants," the older man whispered urgently. "Visitors coming tomorrow, government officials from Richmond." "What kind of officials?" Isaiah asked. "Tax assessors, officially, but rumors say they're investigating irregularities in the shipping business." "Carlton's shipping business?" Hope flared briefly in Isaiah's chest. "Jeremiah's contacts. They're moving faster than we expected." "Perhaps," Moses cautioned, "or it could be unrelated. We can't afford to assume." The next morning confirmed the rumors. 2 stern-faced men arrived in an official-looking carriage, presenting credentials to a visibly unsettled Harrington. Isaiah, positioned in the small office near the kitchen, could not hear the conversation, but observed the master's increasingly agitated body language through the doorway. James, passing by with Harrington's morning coffee, paused just long enough to murmur, "Treasury Department," asking about shipping manifests and cargo discrepancies. Throughout the day, tension permeated the household. Harrington spent hours closeted with the officials, occasionally sending for specific ledgers, the legitimate plantation accounts, not the secret records of human trafficking. Isaiah maintained his position, working steadily while straining to gather what information he could from servants' gossip and glimpsed interactions. By afternoon, a new development emerged. The officials requested to speak with various slaves who had accompanied shipments to the river landings. Harrington could hardly refuse without arousing further suspicion, though his reluctance was evident. The interviews took place in the overseer's office, well away from the main house. Isaiah, of course, was not among those summoned, but Moses managed to learn from one of the field hands that the questions focused on what exactly was loaded onto boats at night, how many men were involved, and whether any slaves had disappeared following these shipments. "They know," Isaiah whispered to Moses when they had a moment alone. "They actually know, and they're building a case." "Don't celebrate yet," Moses warned. "Harrington has powerful friends, and the law has never been overly concerned with the welfare of slaves." Still, the development offered a fragile hope. If Carlton's operation was under investigation, the planned transfer of Samuel, Ezekiel, and David might be disrupted or postponed. That hope was shattered later that evening. Isaiah, returning late from the main house, found Moses waiting with grim news. "They're moving up the schedule," the older man said without preamble. "Samuel, Ezekiel, and David are being transferred tonight. Jenkins is preparing them now." Isaiah's blood ran cold. "Tonight? But the officials are leaving at dusk. Harrington is taking no chances. The moment they're gone, he's moving the men out. Captain Wells has been notified to meet them at midnight instead of next week." Desperation clawed at Isaiah's chest. "We have to warn Jeremiah. His people won't be ready." "There's no time," Moses said, his voice heavy with defeat. "No way to get word to town and back before nightfall." Isaiah paced frantically, his clubfoot dragging more prominently in his agitation. "Then we warn them ourselves. Samuel, Ezekiel, David, they need to know what awaits them. If they resist, run." "They'll be shot," Moses interrupted harshly. "Is that better than what awaits them downriver? To die here, tonight, rather than work to death over weeks?" The brutal calculation silenced Isaiah momentarily. Was a quick death preferable to prolonged suffering? Who was he to make that choice for other men? "There must be something we can do," he finally said. Moses was silent for a long moment, his weathered face lined with the weight of impossible decisions. "Perhaps there is," he said at last. "Not to save them, but to ensure they are not forgotten, to ensure this operation is exposed, no matter what happens tonight." "How?" "The ledger, the proof. If it were to find its way into the hands of those Treasury officials before they depart, Isaiah understood immediately. They'd have evidence of the entire operation, names, dates, destinations. Moses nodded. A record that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. But Isaiah, his voice grew heavy, to take that ledger means certain death if you're caught. And even if you succeed, Harrington will know someone betrayed him. The consequences for everyone here would be severe. The weight of this truth settled between them. Whatever choice they made now would have repercussions far beyond their individual fates. If we do nothing, Isaiah said slowly, Samuel, Ezekiel, and David disappear tonight. Next month, 5 more men, then 7 more. How many lives are worth the risk? Moses closed his eyes briefly, a lifetime of hard choices evident in the deep lines of his face. Go, he said finally. I'll create a distraction near the field quarters. Draw Jenkins and his men away for a few minutes. It's all the time you'll have. The plan, hastily formed and desperately dangerous, was set in motion as dusk approached. Isaiah made his way to the main house under the pretense of returning ledgers, his heart pounding so loudly he was certain others must hear it. The Treasury officials were preparing to depart, their carriage being loaded at the front of the house. Harrington was with them, maintaining a facade of cooperative civility that barely masked his relief at their imminent departure. Isaiah slipped into the empty study, moving quickly to the portrait that concealed the safe. The combination turned smoothly under his fingers, the door swinging open to reveal the black ledger. He grabbed it, tucking it inside his shirt, then closed the safe and straightened the portrait. Just as he turned to leave, the study door opened. Mistress Harrington stood in the doorway, her suspicious eyes taking in the scene, Isaiah alone in the study, clearly not engaged in any legitimate task. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. Isaiah's mind raced. "Returning ledgers, mistress. Master Harrington asked me to ensure everything was in order before the officials left." Her eyes narrowed. "Did he indeed? Strange that he didn't mention this to me." She stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. "Empty your pockets, now." "Mistress, Empty them, or I'll call for Jenkins." Isaiah slowly pulled out the few meager possessions he carried, the stub of pencil Moses had given him, a scrap of cloth. The ledger remained hidden against his chest, beneath his shirt, its outline hopefully concealed by the loose fabric. Mistress Harrington circled him slowly, her gaze predatory. "There's something different about you, Isaiah, something that's been troubling me for weeks." She reached out suddenly, grabbing his arm with surprising strength. "What are you hiding?" A commotion outside saved him from having to answer. Shouts came from the direction of the field quarters, followed by the sound of running feet. Moses had created his distraction. "Fire!" someone yelled. "Fire in the north field!" Mistress Harrington's grip loosened as she turned toward the window. Isaiah seized the moment, twisting free and limping rapidly toward the door. "Stop!" she commanded, but he was already moving, his clubfoot hampering his speed but not his determination. He burst from the study into the hallway, colliding with a house servant who was rushing to investigate the commotion. Isaiah pushed past, heading not toward the main entrance where Harrington and the officials would be, but toward the kitchen and the rear servants' exit. Behind him, Mistress Harrington's voice rose in alarm. "Thief! Stop him! Isaiah is stealing from the master's study!" The cry sent servants and field hands scrambling, uncertain who to obey or what exactly was happening. Isaiah used the confusion to his advantage, weaving through the kitchen and out the back door, the precious ledger still secured against his chest. The Treasury official's carriage stood ready at the front of the house. Isaiah circled wide around the building, staying in the shadows, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he pushed his uncooperative body harder than it had ever been pushed. The officials were saying their final farewells to Harrington when Isaiah emerged from the side of the house, directly into their line of sight. Time seemed to slow as their eyes met his, a slave, clearly in distress, clutching something to his chest. "Sir!" Isaiah called out, his voice cracking with urgency. "Please, you need to see this." Harrington's face transformed from polite civility to murderous rage in an instant. "Seize him!" he shouted to nearby servants. "He's stealing plantation property." But Isaiah had reached the officials, thrusting the black ledger into the hands of the taller man. "The special shipments," he gasped. "Men being trafficked. Tonight, Samuel, Ezekiel, David, Eastern landing at midnight." The official, startled but professional, glanced down at the ledger in his hands, then back at Isaiah's desperate face. In that brief moment of connection, something passed between them. An understanding, a recognition of the risk Isaiah had taken. Then hands were on him, pulling him away. Jenkins had arrived, along with two burly field hands. Isaiah didn't resist as they forced him to his knees, knowing that the crucial evidence was now beyond Harrington's reach. "This slave is delusional," Harrington was saying to the officials, his voice strained with barely controlled fury. "Prone to fits of invention and theft. The book he's given you is plantation property." Moy, the taller official, opened the ledger, his expression changing subtly as he scanned the contents. "This appears to be a record of unusual transactions, Mr. Harrington. Names, dates, substantial sums of money." "Farming operations," Harrington insisted. "Nothing more. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to deal with this thief appropriately." The second official stepped forward. "I believe we'll need to examine this ledger more thoroughly, sir. And given the specific accusations this man has made regarding tonight's activities, we may need to delay our departure." "On the word of a slave?" Harrington scoffed, though Isaiah could see fear beginning to crack his confident facade. "On the evidence presented," the official corrected firmly. "If there is indeed a shipment of men scheduled for tonight, we have a legal obligation to investigate." What followed was a blur of activity. The officials, now joined by two associates who had been waiting in their carriage, took control of the situation with surprising authority. Harrington protested, threatened, eventually attempted to bribe them, all to no avail. The ledger contained evidence too damning to ignore or explain away. Isaiah remained under guard, expecting at any moment to feel the lash or worse for his betrayal. Yet as the officials organized an expedition to the Eastern Landing to intercept the planned transfer, he found himself not punished but questioned, his testimony recorded by a stern-faced clerk. "You understand the risk you've taken?" the taller official asked him privately during a brief lull in the proceedings. Isaiah nodded. "Better than most, sir." "Why? Why risk your life for men you barely know?" The question gave Isaiah pause. Why indeed? The answer, when it came, surprised even him with its simplicity. "Because no man should disappear without witness," he replied. "Because someday, someone needs to remember what happened here." The official studied him thoughtfully. "There may be consequences for everyone on this plantation once this operation is exposed. Not all will thank you for what you've done." "I know," Isaiah acknowledged. "But some evils must be faced in the light, whatever the cost of seeing them clearly." As night fell completely, a grim procession departed for the Eastern Landing. The Treasury officials, now reinforced by local law enforcement summoned from the nearest town, along with a reluctant and seething Harrington. Isaiah remained behind under guard, his fate uncertain. Moses found him sitting outside the overseer's office, watched by a young deputy who seemed uncomfortable with his assignment. "They found the ledger," the older man said quietly, settling beside Isaiah with a groan of aging joints. "They did." Isaiah glanced at his friend. "The distraction worked. Thank you." Moses shook his head slowly. "No need for thanks. Whatever happens now, you've done a thing few slaves ever manage. You've spoken truth to power and been heard. But Samuel, Ezekiel, David, "We'll know soon enough if they can be saved," Moses interrupted gently. "But even if they cannot, others will be. The operation is exposed now. It cannot continue as before." They sat in companionable silence as the night deepened around them. Eventually, the sound of approaching horses announced the return of the expedition. Isaiah and Moses watched as the procession came into view. The officials, the local lawmen, and to Isaiah's immense relief, 3 confused but very much alive men: Samuel, Ezekiel, and David. The operation had been intercepted just as the transfer was about to take place. Captain Wells had been arrested, along with several associates. Harrington himself rode at the rear, no longer under his own authority but in custody, his hands bound before him. As the group passed, Harrington's gaze found Isaiah. The hatred in those eyes was a tangible thing, promising retribution should the opportunity ever arise. Isaiah met that gaze steadily, no longer lowering his eyes in subservience. Whatever happened next, he had broken that bond forever. The following days were a whirlwind of confusion and change on the plantation. With Harrington in custody and charges mounting as the investigation expanded to include Carlton and his network, the fate of the plantation and its slaves hung in uncertainty. Treasury officials remained to oversee operations temporarily, cataloging assets and taking further testimonies. Isaiah found himself in the strange position of being both a crucial witness and still legally property, his status as unresolved as everyone else's. 1 week after the failed shipment, Isaiah was summoned to the main house. The taller Treasury official, Williams, Isaiah had learned was his name, waited in what had been Harrington's study. "Isaiah," Williams greeted him, gesturing to a chair. It was the first time in his life a white man had invited him to sit in his presence. Isaiah lowered himself cautiously into the chair, his clubfoot aching from the long walk from the quarters. "The investigation is proceeding well," Williams began. "Carlton has been arrested. We've identified 3 similar operations in neighboring counties. Dozens of men have been spared the fate you helped expose." Isaiah nodded, waiting. There would be more. "Your testimony will be crucial in the legal proceedings," Williams continued, "which presents us with a complication. As you know, slaves cannot legally testify against white men in Virginia courts." "I know the law, sir," Isaiah replied quietly. Williams leaned forward, his expression serious. "There are influential people taking an interest in this case, people who see an opportunity not just to prosecute individual criminals, but to expose the larger evils of certain practices." Isaiah understood. Abolitionists. Jeremiah's contacts had indeed been powerful ones. The government cannot be seen to directly support such political positions. Williams continued carefully, "But in this particular case, certain arrangements have been made." He placed a folded document on the desk between them. "This is a manumission paper, signed and witnessed, legal in all respects." Isaiah stared at the document, unable to fully comprehend its significance. "You are being freed, Isaiah," Williams said simply. "Your testimony will be given as a free man, not as slave property. After the trial, arrangements will be made to transport you north, where your skills with numbers and letters will serve you well in starting a new life." Freedom. The word Isaiah had barely allowed himself to think now lay before him, in ink on paper. His hands trembled as he reached for the document. "Why?" he managed to ask, his voice thick with emotion. "Why me and not others?" William's expression softened slightly. "Politics and justice make strange companions. Your freedom serves both. It secures crucial testimony and satisfies certain political interests. I won't pretend it's fair that only you are being freed when all deserve the same. But perhaps it is a beginning." Isaiah thought of Moses, of James, of all those who had risked themselves alongside him. The others who helped are being protected as best we can arrange, Williams assured him. No direct action will be taken against anyone on this plantation. The property will likely be sold, the slaves distributed to new owners, but there will be no punishments for what happened here. It was both more than Isaiah could have hoped for and less than true justice demanded. Freedom for one while others remained in bondage was a bitter kind of victory. Yet as he held the manumission paper in his hands, no longer the property of another, Isaiah felt the weight of possibility it represented, not just for himself, but for what his testimony might help accomplish, for the men saved from Carlton's operation, for those who might be saved in the future. After the trial, Isaiah said slowly, I want to work with those who helped expose this, the network. I have knowledge that could be useful. Williams studied him carefully. That would be a dangerous path. Even as a free man, such activities would put you at considerable risk. I know, Isaiah replied simply, but freedom means little if not used in service of others, still in chains. The official nodded, neither encouraging nor discouraging, merely acknowledging the choice as Isaiah's own to make, perhaps the first truly free choice of his life. That evening, Isaiah returned to the slave quarters one final time to say farewell to Moses. The older man listened as Isaiah explained what had transpired, his weathered face revealing little. When Isaiah had finished, Moses was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he said, You carry a heavy responsibility now, not just for yourself, but for all whose stories you'll tell. I know, Isaiah replied. I wish, Don't, Moses interrupted gently. Don't wish that others could go with you. Don't carry that guilt. Each of us has our path. Yours leads north and beyond. Use it well. They embraced then, an unusual gesture between men accustomed to containing their emotions. In that brief contact, everything that couldn't be said was communicated. Gratitude, respect, the bittersweet nature of Isaiah's singular deliverance. Remember, Moses whispered as they parted, no matter what comes, we were not silent. We did not look away. We bore witness. Isaiah nodded, his throat too tight for speech. As dawn broke the following day, Isaiah stood at the edge of the Harrington plantation for the last time. Before him lay an uncertain path, fraught with dangers, but undeniably his own. Behind him remained those whose courage had made his freedom possible, whose stories he would carry forever. The club foot that had marked him as damaged, as less valuable property, dragged slightly as he took his first steps as a free man. Yet Isaiah moved with a certainty he had never known before, the certainty not of destination, but of purpose. He would bear witness, he would remember, he would return in whatever ways became possible for those left behind. And in that promise lay the true meaning of freedom, not merely the absence of chains, but the presence of responsibility, the obligation to use one's liberty in service of justice still deferred, freedom still denied to others. Isaiah limped forward into the rising sun, carrying with him the weight and the gift of that understanding.